being on that. So would you very briefly introduce yourself and then you can ask Kate to share your slides.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Carl, very much. It's great to be here, great to be part of something Keswick, which was so much part of my life for many years. I was a Keswick trustee and involved with programming and youth and goodness knows what else. So it's lovely to be involved again with something at Keswick. I'm at present an associate minister at Christ Church in Winchester and lead the Sages group there, but I'm married to Heather, got 3 sons and they have wives and we have 7 grandchildren. And I'm still fairly active, although very ancient. I suffer watching Tottenham every now and again. That's about as much suffering as any man can put up with.
Super. So shall we start your presentation then, Dave?
That would be lovely. Thank you very much. Well, it's lovely to be here to see everybody and hope you're enjoying the morning. I'm sure you are. Shame we're not gazing out through those big windows to the mountains of Lakeland, but you know, I spent many hours gazing at those mountains and marveling at the beauty. But they've given me a topic of retirement and grand mentoring, and let's begin with one of the roots of it, which I find interesting, and then I'm going to slightly twist it, if you like, into something which I think profoundly is one of the great ways forward for our church in the future. So purpose. Kate, please, if we could. That's lovely. We've done the introductions and we're on to purpose. Thank you very much. I had a look at grand mentoring. It's always something that's interested me. And I found in a secular organization's publicity, trying to recruit people to do grand mentoring. And it is to transform, this was their purpose statement, to transform the lives of young people through the emotional and practical support of our older world-wise volunteers. Which I thought was good, transform the lives of young people through the emotional and practical support of our older world-wise volunteers, namely us, seniors. One young person also on that website said they benefited from the scheme and was quoted as saying, "It is simply amazing to know that there is a local, truly supportive person who will always want to help me." And the roots of this idea of grand mentoring I think originate in a secular context. The idea is to give young people a vital link as they navigate particularly life after being in care. That's the root of it, this concept that seems to have been around a few years now. The aim is to form positive relationships that support, challenge and empower mentees to unlock their own skills and to shape their own futures. So that's the idea, that there is somehow a way of linking us as seniors to young people who've come out, in their case, from a difficult background, and to help them with the skills of life. And that's where it comes from. So thirdly, it's an excellent retirement opportunity. Before we get, as it were, spiritual, let's just say this is a great idea, I think. It would be if retired people were prepared to give of their time to shape the lives of the young. Now, I'm someone who's been involved at both ends of this. I currently run a seniors group. I spent many years and waking hours thinking and planning youth ministry. And I see the need at both ends. And it often frustrated me. One of the reasons I got into seniors ministry was that it frustrated me that there seemed to be so little link, that we're fragmented, that we've made our churches, our society, a generational society. So the young think we are, you know, caricatured by the fact that we spend all our time wheeling Zimmer frames around, or we're ancient and senile and our minds have gone potty, you know, we're no good anymore. And it's this idea that the society can do that. Just again, I watched a video clip, again, not a Christian one. And these young people were saying they got support. They support you in education, someone to talk to when you're struggling or have worries, someone outside the picture to talk to, help with future goals. You can guide me, learn from your experience, helping find a job, start a business, help with CVs, and so on. You know, young people saying, wouldn't it be brilliant if there was someone senior who could guide, help, shape me? And therefore blows an absolute coach and horses through the idea that young people are all sitting there saying, we don't want anything to do with seniors. It is a nonsense, both on the basis of evidence and both on my experience. I have actually done this in my own church. I have put young people with seniors who have given of their time and their wisdom, and let's be frank, their love. And therefore it leads me to my most crucial point of the morning, I think, and that's the next one, point 4, a biblical mandate. There seems to be, I have got here, I Googled the idea of mentoring, and I got from the Open Bible 11 pages of quotes. There they are, 11 pages of quotes which apply to the idea that one generation, Psalm 145 verse 4, shall commend your works, God's works, to another. And across the generations, there seems to be the potential within a biblical context. And certainly in my travels, I've been to Israel, I don't know, 8 or 9 times. I have seen this in operation where older people are respected, revered, and listened to. And the wisdom of God that they have acquired over their years of living can be transferred to a younger life. And it is expected in that culture that that will happen. It's the sitting on the knee, listening to grandpa. You know, I always remember when I visited my my grandson or his family, and my son was there. And I walked in, and Ben was sat there with his children's Bible. He had his children's Bible. And I walked straight through the door, and he didn't even say, hello, Grandpa. He simply said, where's Canaan? I said, pardon? He said, where's Canaan? And then I heard this voice, my daughter-in-law in the kitchen said, oh, we're waiting for you to deal with that one. And the argument was this. Ben had sat there and he said, Canaan is not on my computer list of countries, so it doesn't exist. Therefore, the Bible's wrong. And it took me an hour of Canaan, the Exodus, the conquest of Israel with a 5-year-old to just explain the story of God's deliverance of his people. And I think that was probably the moment where I realized that a little boy with his children's Bible open was open to the idea that God had some teaching that I knew something about, a little bit about, that I could pass on to my grandson. And so there is a very clear, I've given you the reference there at the bottom of this slide, the Open Bible Info Topics Mentoring. Look at it. It will amaze you how many times God says, in one sense or another, that it is possible for one generation to impact the lives of others in another generation. I am still teaching my youth group. When I left Keswick Youth Work, I thought that might be the end, but I've been persuaded otherwise. I go to the Oaks in Sheffield and I teach them on a discipleship course every year. And I teach the young people in my church. I have a relationship with 2 young men to disciple them with the Bible open between us. Friends, this is profound. This is something which, in one sense, in this ultimate generational society in which we live, transferring wisdom from God, as it were, into the hearts and lives of young people is a profound and wonderful thing. In the Q&A I mentioned yesterday, Stuart Harris, father of Rosemary Harris, who, bless her, was a trustee like me of Keswick for many years. And he did that. I asked him to do it when I was in Sheffield. And he had these young men and taught them the scriptures and passed on the wisdom of God to them. I commend it to you as a biblical mandate. It seems that God had the idea long before the secular movement of grand mentoring had it. The idea that God said, let us pass on. Look at those other verses. Train a child in the way he would go, and even when he is old, we will not depart from it. Guys, we have this wisdom. God has trained us, has taught us, has shaped us. He's given us experiences which are precious and wonderful, and we should be passing them on. Urge younger men to be self-controlled. Titus 2 verse 6. Show yourself, look at this, this is a bit of a challenge. Show yourself to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned. Well, there's a challenge. My goodness. But if we did it, think of the impact that if all of us went home and somehow made this happen, and I'm going to talk practically about that in a moment, the passing on of God's good wisdom to the next generation. Wow, let's get excited about it. Now, beware, it is not, when we meet with these younger people, it is not us saying, it wasn't like this in my day, my goodness, if only you'd been through the war, and all such stupid remarks as that. It's not that. It's being, first of all, I think, a good listener. It's being prepared to sit down with someone and allow them to express doubts and fears, and as possible, bring some biblical teaching and values into their lives, and to help them see how to live in this current world that they live. Now, if this is to be achieved in churches, and I think it does need to be achieved at that level, let's go on to the next bit. The church needs to have intergenerational values. Now, if you heard me yesterday, then you know I'm always beefing on about this, but it's one of my favorites. But it's many churches are monogenerational. They simply are one generation. And in that context, they just have the one generation that exists within their church. Not many are like that, but there are some. And the only chance of grand mentoring there would be, and I've seen this happen, through contacts with a local school or community initiative. Many good reasons for seniors to be part of schools. Schools are crying out for input into various curriculum levels. History is one, but there are many others. I went and did a mathematical puzzle session for one of my daughters-in-law who's a teacher the other day, and I just went in and did the stuff I used to do when I was a maths teacher. Now, many churches are generational, and these are the ones that need to wake up. Their programs are mostly age-related. Everything they do is geared to that age. It's mothers and toddlers, it's seniors, it's that, it's this, and they're all broken up. But for goodness sake, in our churches, we have all generations. Why do we keep them separate, as society increasingly is doing? And if we could just promote intergenerational activity, some of this is really trivial, but if we could promote church gatherings which people enjoy. One of the joys of life at Fulham when I was there in Sheffield was the Christmas party, which the Reverend Philip Hacking, former chairman of Keswick, used to run. It was the highlight of his year, I think. And we had a laugh and a ball together, and young people were there, all ages were there. Perhaps we could create small groups praying for youth groups, again, across the generations. Seniors encouraged to visit and talk to Sunday schools. All ages participate and lead services. A youth group does maybe a 5-minute sermon or word of testimony. Young people serve at seniors' Christmas lunch, and so on and so on. I could go on. I've got loads of things I've got elsewhere I could talk to you about. But these ideas where the generations cross, and that means we then start thinking about where we can use seniors appropriately. That's the next one, Kate, if you could. That's great, thank you. Create the ideas that seniors and youth being around together is okay, and use them in any kind of service role with younger people. I talked more about that yesterday, but you can get the detail on the handout. In doing so, we create a culture which says seniors are okay people to be around young people. And that leads us to then say, once we've created that value system, then we go on to initiate structures. And that's always done with safeguarding in mind. So on to 7, Kate, if you would, thank you. Safeguarding in mind. We may need to train our seniors and be clear about the aim of meeting as a grand mentor with a young person, a younger person. It is to listen, to guide. It needs negotiations to how you do it. It needs boundaries, most obviously single gender. And I would always love to have some element of Bible study. And my dream is that in amongst all this, as I come to the end of my time, is that somehow there would be, and it may start very small. What I'm doing at the moment in Winchester is quite tiny, but it's the beginnings of the idea that it is all right to say to young people, there is someone in the church who would happily sit down with you and talk about the issues you face. Now, I'm going to be really rude now. Many youth leaders are too young to do this. They lack the wisdom and the knowledge often to do it effectively. Young people need lots of things. They need leaders who are young, trendy, hip, and cool. But they also need people who are mature. There's a man who lives about half a mile down the road from where I'm sat. He's a trained counsellor. He is 82, I think it is. That man is used by young people who come face to face with some really tricky issues. And they go to Rob because wisdom oozes out of him. And he's a man of God, and he loves the word. And he teaches them the word. And he actually brings together the culture, which he's listened to very carefully, and the word of God that he studied intensely over his years. And that man has suffered the death of both a wife and a daughter. He's been through absolute murder in his life. And yet what comes out of him is grace and a wonderful relationship and love of God. So let's begin to say that it is possible. And here I'll finish with my dream. My dream is that some of the fabulous people that I know in my church who love the Lord Jesus, who've served him faithfully for many, many years, who've been through some pretty hairy experiences which have left them bereft and feeling desperate and often wondering what the future will hold, and have clung on to their relationship with God, come through difficult times, have an awful lot to pass on to the next generation. And my dream is that I'll stand at the back of church and I will see a young person come out of church and go up and hug the 80-year-old that they spend time with and say how valuable it is that that man, that woman, has been in my life and has helped me grow in grace and in the knowledge of God. And for me, that's so important. One of the things I do, you've seen the website of the organization that I head up, AfterWorkNet. We're trying to create active retired people. And one of the things I dream about is that we will have seniors who've experienced the highs and lows of godly living, who will then say to young people, let me share something of the wonderful works of God in my life. Friends, I think this is dynamite. I think if it worked, if it flourished, if we could break down these generational barriers and we could see the way in which that could work and help these young people grow and go through the times. I'll finish with one story. A girl who was abused by a very difficult family. The abuse was chronic. It was a very difficult case. She was in pieces at the end of this. And I won't bore you with the details, but she turned up at church and we found a lady who has never been in the public eye at the church. And she's not one of these ladies that sort of says, I'm here, I'm big, and I make lots of noise. You're one of those ladies. She's very quiet. What that lady has done with that woman, young woman, who's been abused, has brought her to the point where she is so full of joy in the Lord because of the hours and hours and hours she spent with her, just helping her understand that God loves her, has plans and purposes to prosper her, not to harm her, and has brought her to a place of fulfillment, of joy, and of trust in people again. That's all been done through grand mentoring. I leave it with you. It's got to be done properly. It's got to be done with proper safeguarding and all those procedures. That's a given. But it's got to be done.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much for that challenge, but also just the wise reflections that you've given us. So much to chew over. And friends, do keep your comments and questions coming in on the chat.